My name is Emily, and you're listening to Daily English Talk, a place where we practice calm, natural English together, the kind of English you can really use in your life. And today, I want to talk with you about your year, about the last 12 months of your life, the things you experienced, the things you learned, the moments that stayed with you, and the moments you may already have forgotten. Because talking about your year is not just good English practice. It's also a gentle way to understand yourself better. This time of year always feels a little special to me. There's something quiet and thoughtful in the air, like the world is taking a deep breath. And when I sit down with a cup of tea and think about the past year, I don't just think about dates or events. I think about feelings, changes, small moments, and lessons that slowly shaped me without me even noticing at first. So, as you listen to this episode, I want you to imagine that we are sitting together, maybe in a quiet room, maybe by a window, and we are simply talking. No pressure, no tests, no perfect answers, just English flowing naturally. Because this episode is not about being correct, it's about being real. When people ask, "How was your year?" we often answer very quickly. We say things like, "It was good," or "It was busy," or "It was difficult." But your year is always more than one word. Even a simple year is full of moments, choices, changes, and growth. And learning how to talk about that in English is a beautiful skill. When I think about my year, the first thing I notice is how fast it went, and I hear this from so many people. We say, "The year flew by," or "I can't believe how fast time passed." And these expressions are very common in English, because time really does feel different when you're living inside it compared to when you're looking back. At the beginning of the year, 12 months feels like a long time, but at the end, it feels like a blink, like everything happened at once. And when we talk about this in English, we often use the past simple to describe finished events. Things like, I started a new job, I moved to a new place, I traveled, or I stayed home a lot. And each of these simple sentences can carry so much meaning. But talking about your year is not only about listing what you did, it's also about reflecting, about looking back and asking yourself, what changed? What did I learn? How am I different now? And this is where English becomes more than a language. It becomes a way to think. For example, you might say, last year, I worked a lot. But then you can go deeper and say, I realized that balance is important. Or, I learned that I need more rest. And these kinds of sentences show growth, not just activity. When I look back at my own year, I see moments that were very ordinary at the time. Days that felt normal, maybe even boring. But now I understand that those days were important because they built routines, habits, and stability. And in English, we often talk about this with phrases like, I spent a lot of time, or I got used to, or I slowly learned to. And these expressions are perfect for talking about long periods of time. There were also moments that stood out, moments that felt different, moments that I remember clearly. And when we talk about those, we might say, one of the most important moments was, or the best part of my year was, or a difficult moment was. And these structures help us organize our thoughts and tell our story clearly. Sometimes when people practice English, they focus only on grammar. But storytelling like this helps everything come together because you're using past tenses, emotions, transitions, and real vocabulary all at once. And that's how language becomes natural. I want you to think for a moment about your own year. Not in a rushed way, just gently. Maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is work, or family, or health, or learning English, and whatever comes first is important because it means it left a mark. Many people spent this year working very hard, maybe harder than they expected. And when we talk about that in English, we often say things like, I worked a lot, I was very busy, or I had a lot of responsibilities. And these sentences are simple but honest. And honesty always sounds good in any language. Other people had a year of change. Maybe they moved, changed jobs, ended or started relationships. And change often brings mixed feelings, excitement, and fear at the same time. And English has beautiful ways to express that. You can say, it was challenging, but I learned a lot. Or, it was difficult at first, but it helped me grow. And these sentences show reflection and maturity. And then there are years that feel quiet. Maybe nothing big happened on the outside, but something changed inside you. Your mindset, your priorities, the way you see yourself. And those changes are just as important, even if they're harder to explain. But you can still talk about them in English. You can say, I became more patient, or I started thinking differently, or I feel more confident now. And these sentences are powerful. One thing I really love about talking about your year is that it naturally invites gratitude. Even if the year was hard, there are usually moments we can be thankful for. A kind person, a small success, a moment of peace. And when we talk about gratitude in English, we often say, I'm grateful for, or I really appreciated. And these phrases add warmth to your story. At the same time, it's also okay to talk about difficulties. English allows you to do that in a calm, respectful way. You can say, it was a tough year, or I struggled with, or there were moments when I felt lost. And these sentences are not negative. They're honest, and honesty builds connection. As you practice talking about your year, you'll notice that you naturally use different tenses. The past simple for finished events, the present perfect for experiences and changes that still matter now, like, I have learned, I have grown, I have realized. And this is exactly how native speakers reflect on time. For example, you might say, this year, I learned a lot about myself, or I have become more aware of my limits. And these sentences connect your past experiences with your present self, which is the essence of reflection. Another beautiful part of talking about your year is lessons. Life lessons don't come from books, they come from living, and everyone learns something different. Some people learn about rest, some learn about boundaries, some learn about patience, some learn about courage. And when you talk about lessons in English, you can say, one thing I learned is, or the biggest lesson for me was, and these phrases are very natural and expressive. I want you to remember that there are no right or wrong lessons. Whatever you learned matters, because it changed you. Even if the change is small, even if you can't fully explain it yet. Sometimes saying, I'm still learning, is the most honest sentence. As we talk about the past year, we also naturally start thinking about the future, because reflection often leads to intention. And English allows you to move gently from past to future with phrases like, next year, I want to, or moving forward, I hope to, or in the future, I'd like to. And these expressions don't create pressure. They create direction. But before we fully look ahead, it's important to really close the year, to acknowledge what it gave you, what it took from you, and what it taught you, and talking about it, even quietly, even just listening, helps you do that. If you're listening to this podcast as part of your English learning journey, I want to say something very important. Learning a language is a long process, and if you've been studying English this year, even a little, that is a big achievement. You may not feel fluent yet, but progress is not always loud. Sometimes it's slow and steady, and that kind of progress lasts. You might say, this year, I improved my English, or I became more comfortable listening, or I'm not afraid to speak as much as before. And these sentences deserve pride, because learning a language is not easy, and you're doing it. As this first part of our conversation comes to a gentle pause, I want you to keep listening, not just with your ears, but with your thoughts. Let memories come and go. Let English feel familiar. Because in the next part, we'll go deeper into lessons, emotions, and how to talk about your year in a way that feels natural and meaningful. As we continue talking about the year, I want to slow down even more and move away from big events and big words. Because sometimes the most important parts of a year are the quiet ones. The everyday moments that don't look special at first, but later you realize they changed you. For me, this year was not about one big dramatic change. It was about consistency, about showing up every day even when I didn't feel motivated, even when I felt tired. And that is something I didn't always know how to do in the past, because before, I believed that progress only happened when I felt inspired. But this year taught me something different. I live a pretty simple life. I wake up, I make my coffee, I sit by the window for a few minutes, and that small routine became very important to me this year because it gave me a sense of calm, And when I talk about this in English, I might say, I started appreciating small routines, or I learned to enjoy simple moments, and these sentences describe a big interchange. There were days this year when nothing went wrong, but nothing exciting happened either. Just normal days. And in the past, I used to think those days were a waste. But now I understand that those days are the foundation of a good life. They support the big moments, and without them, everything feels unstable. This year, I also learned to listen to myself more, especially when it comes to energy and emotions. There were moments when I said no to plans, not because I didn't care, but because I needed rest. And saying no was not easy for me before, but now it feels like a form of respect toward myself. In English, this kind of reflection often comes with phrases like, I realized that I need, or I understood that it's okay to. And these sentences are very common when people talk about personal growth, because growth usually starts with awareness. I also spent a lot of time thinking about purpose this year, not in a dramatic way, but quietly, asking myself why I do what I do, why I create this podcast, why I love helping people learn English. And the answer was always the same: connection. I enjoy feeling close to people, even through a voice, even through simple words. Daily English talk became a bigger part of my life this year than I expected, recording episodes, thinking about topics, imagining you listening somewhere in the world, maybe walking, maybe cooking, maybe resting after a long day. And this feeling of being part of someone's routine is very meaningful to me. When I talk about this in English, I might say, this year, I became more connected to my work, or I feel more purpose in what I do. And these are not loud achievements, but they are deep ones. Of course, not everything was easy. There were weeks when I felt unsure, when I questioned myself, when I wondered if what I was doing really mattered, and I think it's important to say this out loud, because many people feel the same way, especially at the end of the year, when reflection becomes honest. In English, you can talk about doubt very gently. You can say, I had moments of uncertainty, or sometimes I felt lost. And these sentences don't mean failure, they mean humanity. One thing that helped me this year was learning to be kinder to myself. My inner voice used to be very strict, always asking for more, always focusing on what I didn't do. But slowly, month by month, that voice became softer. And now, when I look back, I can say, I did my best. And that sentence brings peace. I think this is an important sentence for you to remember in English. I did my best, because it allows you to close the year without regret, without unnecessary guilt, just acceptance. As the year came to an end, I noticed that I wasn't rushing to make big promises for the future. Instead, I felt calm, open, and curious. And when I talk about the future now, I don't say, I must, or I have to. I say, I'd like to, or I hope to. And that change in language reflects a change in mindset. Talking about your year in English is not about sounding impressive. It's about sounding honest. And honesty always sounds natural, even if your grammar isn't perfect, even if you pause, even if you search for words. Because real communication is not about perfection, it's about meaning. I want you to think about one sentence that describes your year. Just one. It could be something like, this year taught me patience, or this year changed me, or even, this year was confusing. And all of those sentences are valid because they come from your experience. And if you want to go deeper, you can add another sentence, because, and explain why. This simple structure helps you speak longer and more clearly. For example, this year taught me patience because things didn't happen as fast as I wanted. And suddenly, you are telling a story. As English learners, you don't need complicated words to express deep ideas. Simple words used honestly are enough. And that's what we practice here. Calm English, real English, English that feels like a conversation, not a performance. Before we finish today, I want to say something directly to you. If this year was hard for you, if you feel tired, disappointed, or unsure, please know that finishing the year is already an achievement. You are still here, you are still learning, and that matters. And if this year was good for you, if you feel proud, excited, or grateful, allow yourself to feel that too. You don't need to minimize your happiness. Joy is also something we learn to accept. As we close this episode, I invite you to take a moment after listening and think about your own year. Maybe even say a few sentences out loud in English. Just for yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. Thank you for spending this time with me, for listening, for reflecting, and for learning. It truly means a lot to me that daily English talk is part of your journey. If you enjoy calm English conversations like this and want to keep practicing real, natural English about real life, don't forget to subscribe to Daily English Talk. It helps the channel grow and allows me to keep creating these episodes for you. Take care of yourself, be gentle with your story, and I'll see you in the next episode.